Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve podcast. Today's guest is an actor, a singer, a tap dancer, a writer, a TV host, and a producer. And that's just some of the things that this guy does. He's very multi-talented.
Yeah.
His name is Roger E Palomino. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Thank you for the invite. And yeah, I think you pretty much covered everything.
Yeah, no, I was just going through all of these things and I'm like, because it makes sense to me. I've had a few actors on the show before and I've done a little bit of acting myself. And I know that
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say if you work in any kind of entertainment role, you tend to be involved in all of these different things just by nature. And
That's true.
that's the thing. The more and more people I meet and the more I kind of get up to date with it, the more I understand that there's this thing in the industry that's like the three, I can't remember what the name of it is, but it's like if you can dance, sing, and act, then that's the
Triple
three.
threat.
Yeah, it's like the three bases kind of covered kind of deal.
Yeah.
Like, is that like, have you always been sort of this way inclined? Because I find with myself, with what I do,
Yeah.
everything's kind of been natural. So like, if I take acting as an example, that's only something I did last year. But as soon as I did it, I was like, oh, this is just like music, which I've done all my life. Like it's natural. I mean,
Right.
how was it for you in terms of not before you got professional, but when you were kind of just starting out? Like, what was that like for you?
Wow. Early on. Yeah. I think my early influences, because my family and I were all originally from Lima, Peru, South America. And so because of my dad's job, we relocated him to Venezuela, also in South America. And so when we moved there, I remember my very first exposure to television. I started watching a lot of black and white projects, especially black and
Cool.
white film and comedies, from the USA. And I think because during that time, that was the late 70s.
Hmm.
And so that was really big back then. I remember a lot of programming was from the USA predominantly. And so I think those were my early influences. And I think I, as a child, would try to imitate and replicate a lot of the action and maybe the dialogue, not so much because I was barely learning English.
Right.
But eventually, the rest is history.
So we're talking, maybe like your Laurel and Hardy, Charlie Chaplin, that kind of thing. Is that more?
Yeah, Laurel and Hardy, Chaplin, the Three Stooges,
Right.
Little
Yeah.
Rascals. Yeah.
It's amazing to me actually because I remember that stuff. I think because I know my grandparents are fans of Laurel and Hardy, and when I saw it, I was like, "This is genius!" Like, obviously,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's something you don't see as much anymore. I don't know if what
You
that's about.
you don't, and I noticed that too. That's one thing I really love about the UK, and also my early influences, because my dad would watch Agatha Christie and Sherlock
Right.
Holmes, and he was a big fan too of my dad. Because of his generation, he introduced me to Benny Hill. I was like, who's that? And so as a kid, I started watching. I was like, oh my God, that's crazy and hilarious. But, I really had an appreciation for that slapstick comedy. I'm like, wow, that's okay. So that's pretty interesting. So a lot of my early exposure was British programming. So I think that's really what I attribute a lot of my influences to as well.
I get that, and I mean that's one thing that's amazed me, particularly when I've lived in different countries around Europe, is like the reach of British media, because obviously like American media and its proliferation is just how it is everywhere in the world. Chances are like the major movies and TV shows and stuff, but with the UK, it's a little bit more niche by comparison. Depends. But with that being said, yeah, like I've met people say in the States that know of Benny Hill, and I'm like, how do you know about Benny Hill? Like, it's such a it's weird. Like,
Yeah, here is what we call repeats on certain networks because they know there's an audience that loves
Mm,
loves that programming. And maybe that might be something that's a trend in different parts of the world. Like maybe they get more programming from outside than watching a lot of their own, maybe. Because I've
yeah.
noticed that in the UK, there's a lot of, for example, I think there's an appreciation. You can correct me if I'm wrong. There's a lot of an appreciation for like the golden era of Hollywood in America and early jazz, from what I noticed.
Yeah, I think it depends on the circles. It's like I said before. Like obviously, our generation, we know about people like Chaplin and and you know, all these older generations and stuff. But I think that maybe it's not as like more as mainstream as it was, kind of thing. And like when it comes to the American media in the UK, obviously we have a lot of like contemporary shows and stuff. And from what I understand of the TV industry, it's like companies like buy these packages. So whatever like country you're in, it's kind of luck of the draw actually what movies or TV shows you'll get. And the same is
Yeah.
true of music as well. So like, for instance, this is really left field, but I lived in a country in Europe called Estonia for 3 years, and
Oh, yes.
recently moved back to the UK. And I remember that they had this like retro station where they play like, you know, 80s 90s music, right? And it would be music that they kind of grew
Nice.
up on in that country, so it'd be a lot of like foreign stuff, but then they had all their own stuff from that time as well. But I noticed like the playlist was very specific. It's the same songs all the time, and it's
Right.
like I would sit there listening to them like, okay, some of them I get, you know, like, okay, there's some Queen, there's, you know, a bit of ABBA, whatever, right? But then there'll be like really random stuff like you remember that song by that band, I think they're called the Crash Test Dummies, where the song's like,
Yes.
I was like, this is such a weirdly
Yeah. Yeah, I
random
do
song.
actually. Wow. Yeah. That brings back memories. Yeah. That brings back memories. Yeah. I grew up listening to that, and yeah, Estonia, correct me if I'm wrong, that was a former Soviet Union. Okay. Yeah. And it's amazing that here, when I meet people, they're amazed that I might know that, because, and the thing is, my parents, especially my daddy, would always get me to watch programming other than just American programming.
Yeah.
It was like, you need to just, you know, as a child. And I think I'm appreciative of that, because I think I have an appreciation for just different cultures. And he would always tell me, you need to watch something other than just American TV, which is great, but you have to expand your horizons. You never know when you're going to get a chance to travel. And he's told me that because as a geologist, a former geologist, he had an opportunity to travel, and he has like a big love and appreciation for the UK for a lot of obvious reasons. But he said before I became an actor, he would tell me, oh yeah, a lot of culture and art and the best actors, which is true. And I'm like, yeah, so I paid attention to all that. I think that influenced everything I do now too as well. So
Yeah, I think it's a solid point. I mean, you know, obviously with me growing up in the UK, like I could obviously relate a lot to Americans, and, you know, I'm very used to the media and stuff, and it's just something, it is the way that it is. But when you start traveling to other countries, you know, it's like where it's so foreign and so different, and you're like, oh, okay. And then, like you said, like
yeah,
I think it goes into all areas of your life. Like once you discover, like, huh, okay, people live in totally different ways in other parts of the world and think differently and act
right.
differently, and everything is different. Movies, you know, like I found some of the most amazing music ever, and films too, from like countries like Estonia, and it's like, oh wow, okay. And to me, it's fascinating. Like I can't believe that people don't travel more, to be honest. Like I think it's one of those things that it seems to be like that's a hobby. Do you know what I mean? Like that's a hobby. Traveling is a hobby, and it's like I get it,
Yeah.
but it should just be something that people do, like eating or I don't know, sleeping. Like it's just
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right about that. I think that's probably the I'd like to call it maybe the envy people have of Europe, is that because the countries are so close together that,
yeah,
and different
it's true.
modes of transportation are accessible to everyone. So I think it makes it easy to just hop on, let's say, a train and say, you know what, I'm going to go to Italy or wherever you want to go, or, you know, from like, let's say London, I'm going to go to Wales. And so that makes it a whole lot easier when they're so close together versus like the USA so huge.
Yeah.
And some of our states are, you know, further out west, and so that makes it a little bit of a challenge. And then, you know, Canada is also a big country, and Mexico and Latin America, you know, it's further out. So yeah, I'd say it's easier to travel in Europe, I would say, just based off of the way it's set up.
Anyway, let's bring it back to you. So you said that, yeah, you were born in Peru, but you then moved with your family and grew up in Maracaibo in Venezuela. Now, I
Correct.
just
Yeah.
wanted to kind of just ask you on this real quick, because I have some friends I've worked with over the years that are from Venezuela, and
Oh yeah.
they're like really chill and casual about this. And I understand now because I've had friends in Europe that have lived in like similar tough situations. So I understand it's like being numb to like crazy stuff. But to me, a British guy who's never experienced this, I'm like, what? But anyway,
Yeah.
there's many that say that it's one of the most dangerous places to live in the world. What are your thoughts on this, being that you were actually, you know, living there for a very long time? And what was it like sort of growing up there when you were there?
I would say I had an advantage because as a child, I moved to Venezuela. We moved there officially in 1978. So we were there in the late 70s, early 80s. So I think back then it was a entirely different time. And the reason why I say that is because the community that we lived at, it was a bunch of families that were also in geology and petroleum, just because of, you know, the country's very rich in oil, kind of like
Right.
where I'm at in Texas. So I had exposure to so many different cultures there already with kids. And I think maybe that's why my appreciation for so many cultures, because, you know, I had kids that were Dutch, there were kids that were South
Cool.
African, kids that were from Trinidad. So um, then it was dangerous, but maybe not as much as like now within the last 10 years, I would say. And it's dangerous for both nationals and foreigners alike. So it doesn't matter how you're dressed or what you look like. You know, you always have to take safety precautions just because of everything that's unfolded within the last 10, 15 years, I'd say.
It's just this concept of like no-go zones is what really blows my mind. Because, you know,
Yeah,
I grew up in London. There are places that there's this place in London called Brixton, for example, which, I mean, I don't know if it's the same now, but when I used to go there, it was the sort of place that you couldn't walk down the high street during the day without there being some trouble. You know, most people, if you live there, you're a local, you're fine, you know, maybe. But it was like it was described as being like a no-go zone. But when it's compared to like places like, you know, certain parts of Venezuela or certain parts of America or wherever else in the world, like no go means no go. It's like you said, like it doesn't matter if you're
right,
a national or even a local. It's like
right.
going there pretty much means death, which that blows my mind right there. That concept.
Completely. Yeah, yeah. That's correct.
Madness. Anyway, yeah. So then you moved to Houston, Texas, and okay. So what kind of let's before we ask this question, I just want to know, like, you
Sure.
said that you moved from Peru to Venezuela at the tail end of the 70s, and it kind of sounded like you were there when you were quite a young, maybe young child, maybe like 4 or 5 years old. Is that right? Something like that.
Correct. Yeah.
So like, how old were you when you sort of left Venezuela?
I was 7 and or I was going to be 7 actually, and we moved to Houston, Texas, Spring, Texas actually in I believe it was January of 1981. And the reason why I say that is because that January, because we're leaving a very tropical climate in Maracaibo, Venezuela, very tropical, very humid, and moving to Houston. And at that time, it was snowing.
Oh,
Well,
wow.
at least what we call snow. And in other parts of the USA, they'll call it sleet, very
Yeah,
thin
yeah, yeah, yeah,
snow.
yeah.
But it was snowing, and so that was my introduction to like, oh wow, snow. So yeah, we moved, and I was going to be 7 that year. So
Damn. Yeah, this
yeah.
fits into my next question. Like, was it a major culture shock for you? Like, how did you adjust to that? Especially being a child as well. I mean, not every child is, you know, I know that like when I was a kid, I was pretty adaptable, but I know that other kids, like sometimes if there's a major change and your parents can't, you know, you can prepare your child to a degree, but with a different culture, it's like everything's different. Like, you know.
Yeah, yeah, totally. When we were in Venezuela, my parents were planning ahead that they wanted to eventually move to the USA, mainly because my older sister was going to graduate high school and go to the university. And so in Venezuela, in Maracaibo, I was already enrolled in an American school. And the reason why is my
Ah,
dad wanted me to learn English fluently, and I did, but maybe not as much as when I moved to Houston. So when we moved here, I had already had friends from different parts of the USA and the world, from English speaking countries. And so I think my shock wasn't necessarily so much with culture, but it was with the classroom size. Because I
Yeah.
went from like a class of like 10 kids, including myself in Venezuela, to like a class of 25. So I think
Damn.
just seeing the big amounts of people at one time maybe was the shock for me, but that only lasted maybe 1 or 2 weeks. And by then I had made friends. And so I got over it fast as a kid.
I guess you were a pretty like outgoing kid by the sound of things. Then it wasn't.
Yeah, once you got me to get out of my shell, yeah, you couldn't get me to stop talking. And I think some teachers early on would say, okay, you need to pull a card, and it had a different color, like, if you're talking out of turn or you're talking too much in class.
Card
So,
This is interesting. A card system.
yeah. Yeah, a card system, like, it's green, and when you pull the card and it's yellow, that's like a warning. And so I think the
Oh,
color
okay.
that followed that was like orange, and then red, you're in deep trouble. So, yeah.
It's just so interesting to hear that around the world. Like, my experience was
Yeah.
very different. Like we had this, well, at least in, well, I don't know what you would call junior school, middle school, something like that. We had a minute system. So, and it sounds
Oh,
really ridiculous now, but basically every Friday, half an hour before we were about to go, we had this thing called golden time, which was 30 minutes, right? So during the course of the week, if you were bad for whatever reason, you would lose a minute. You get a couple of warnings before you'd lose a minute, but it was made like, oh, this is very serious. And it was kind of messed
right.
up now I think about it. Like when it would get to that day, everyone that had like minutes had to basically stand where the board is and basically either one or two things. Either one, they had to stand and watch the clock and hear like everyone else behind them having fun until their time was up, or they had to stand and watch everyone having fun until their time was up. And I sit there thinking about that now, like that's
Wow.
actually kind of messed up,
It would. I think if I would have had that early on, it probably would have had me in line. I would have been like, yeah, no, I'm not acting out of line or talking out of
Yeah.
turn, because I don't want to be watching everyone having a good time.
It's just sick, isn't it? Like,
Yeah. It sounds almost military, because it's equivalent to like, okay, do some push-ups.
yeah, I would have preferred to do push-ups. I would have done that as a kid.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, let's bring it back to you, man. So you have a
Sure.
degree in international business, and I
Yeah.
jumped at this because I studied business for many years,
Nice.
major in management with marketing. So I know roughly. I mean, obviously it depends. Education system is different in every country, but I just wanted to know what prompted you to get into this degree, because this is quite a far departure from what you do for a living. Like you're an actor, musician, all
Right.
of these things. And while things like business and marketing have their uses within what we do, it is very different. So I just wanted to kind of know, like, why you did this, and was it worth it as well? That's one question I want to know.
Yeah, that's a good question. I got into it because I growing up, I knew I wasn't going to be a geologist like my dad. And I think mainly because I knew science and math came easier to him than to me. I think I was more the humanities and the arts. But I had a fascination for business because I noticed that he would travel to all these amazing places, the UK, Sweden, Holland, um, the Caribbean. He's been to like all of Latin America, just about. I mean, just about every country I can think of in Latin
I'm
America.
so
And
jealous.
so, yeah, I was jealous. I was like, I want to travel. I really want to do that. And I even had a fascination with like Africa, because of the kids I would meet that were from South of Africa. So I would hear a lot of amazing things about that particular part of the world, as well as Europe and Asia. I mean, I definitely wanted to travel. So I decided, yeah, why not major in something that would eventually, as a professional, take me from one place to the other. And I think that's what really prompted me to do that.
Nice, man. Nice. And were there any key lessons that you learned from university? Because like I feel like for myself, what I took away from uni was more tied with the experiences and the people I met. Like the actual degree itself, I make jokes about this. I don't like everything that I've done in marketing, like for work purposes, I learned from scratch through the jobs. Like the degree, it was fun. There was theory and stuff, but I haven't used it at all. Like
Oh, wow. Well, at least
everyone's
not yet.
experience.
You never know.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. But like, everyone's experience of university is different. So like, what would you say you took from it, or what are the key lessons, takeaways that you had?
I'd say the key lessons would be the discipline. I had very good professors. The university I went to is Sam Houston State University, and when it first started as a university, it was a teacher's college. So, and then it began to grow and specialize in criminal justice. And then they have a business department. And from what I heard, now they have a film department. I'm jealous. I'm like, really? I wish I would have had that option. And it's known for its broadcasting too. Like some of our well-known broadcasters nationally in the USA were schooled there. So I think the discipline is what I got from that experience. And also, just putting a lot of work in everything that I do. A lot of the professors, there's a saying that goes that it's easy to get into that university, but it's difficult to get out. And it's true because they really make you work for your degree. And I would say that's something that I really utilize now in everything I do, is just the discipline and the dedication to everything. So
that's interesting. I'm glad I asked you that, because I got to say, like, in my experience, at least the unis and the university, it's very like laissez-faire. Like it's like, yeah, you've paid all this money and it's your degree and stuff, but we're not going to push you. Like that's up to you, and like that's your thing. Because I realized, like, when I came to uni, I had to basically relearn everything. Like what we've been doing at we call it A level, so it's the studies between 16 to 18. It's like the tail end of, it's like after high school but just before uni, right?
right.
And this particular way that we were doing assignments and stuff was like not wrong, but just not what you do at uni. Do you know what I mean? Like you have, when you come there, you learn about like journals and how you do your research, how you do your studying. Like everything's different, right?
That's true. Yeah.
So it's like with that, I feel that all of that you do yourself is basically my point. Like, it's up to you. The whole degree experience is up to you in terms of, how hard you push yourself, or maybe you don't push yourself. I knew people that were repeating years again and again. And I'm like, damn, this is costing you like more and more money as well. Like, this isn't like, when you're at school and you could skip a year and it's fine. It's like, this is serious,
Right.
But I remember that, like the teachers' attitudes and the principals and all that were very like, if you mess around, that's up to you. Like they didn't care. And I'm just kind of like, wow, okay.
Nobody's going to tell me you're out of line. You need to.
Well, it's refreshing. What I'm saying is it's refreshing to hear that, like, you went to a university where they were like, they pushed you and they got the most out of you. So it's good.
They were strict. Yeah, they were pretty strict. And that was very well needed during that time, the way I was back then.
And would you say that, like, the degree, or sorry, the business side of things, has it helped you at all with your career? Like, has it made a difference?
It has. I'm a firm believer in the saying that everything happens for a reason. And I guess I'm living proof of that, because the job I have now, I'm currently working for the public access television channel.
Right.
So it's a nonprofit in which that gives everybody an opportunity in the city to create their own program for TV in any format. It could be a film, it could be documentary. And that's where my degree actually played into effect, because I had never worked for a nonprofit prior to my position, but coming in, I came in as a part-time, and then I eventually started getting promoted to like full-time and staff producer, now the outreach director. So I think, everything that I did at the university really helped. And I'm glad I double majored in international business and economics, because, that was able to give me a wider scope of what I wanted to do. And minoring in speech actually got me out of my shyness that I developed in my teenage years.
Yeah. Oh, well done, man. Good on you. I'm trying to actually get into volunteering and that side of things myself as well. And it's funny. I mean, I can't speak for everywhere, but in the UK, like this area where I'm in right now, it's like any typical job situation. So it's like, I'm already applying for what jobs anyway. Now I'm applying for volunteer stuff as well. And it's like, no, we're still going to, push you. We're still going to make you run. Like,
Right. Yeah.
I'm giving you my time, people.
Totally. Yeah.
But fair
Totally.
play. No, you want the best of the best, don't you? You want people that are going to be committed and work hard and stuff. And I get that.
Yeah.
But yeah. So let's move it forward. Let's go straight into another aspect of your career. According to your IMDb, you had a career in banking, which I found quite interesting. But I wanted to look at the customer service side of this, because I've worked in customer services quite extensively over the years. And was the position that you did at any point customer facing, or was it behind the scenes?
It was completely customer facing. I think they realized that I enjoyed being around people, and
Oh, cool.
I talked a lot. So they're like, "Oh, we need to put him." Nobody wants to deal with all the customers that are upset because of whatever. When you're dealing with people's money, any little thing could get them upset. It's like, you owe me 1 cent. It's like, okay, and so they had me deal with all that. I think that also helped with what I'm doing as an actor too, because not to say that you would get along with everyone, but you learn the different personality types in which you can make it at least civil, where you can work together for the time and just say thank you until the next project.
Do you have any like crazy stories from that time? I mean, I feel like in
I
America.
do.
Oh, please share a few. I would love to hear.
In America, yeah, Americans are very colorful, very colorful. I guess with any part of the world, but especially here. I had one lady at a particular location, at a particular bank branch, that she came in and she said, we were about to close and we were getting ready, and all of a sudden she walks in and she's like, they're after me. And she starts laying out all of her items on a little table we had there. I'm like, okay, who's after you? And she's acting as if she's going to have a picnic and all her belongings are spread out. And she said, the Kennedys. I'm like, the Kennedys? And part of me was laughing inside internally. And I said, oh, you mean like John F. Kennedy Jr.? And she's like, yes. Oh, okay. And she started mentioning, and Robert Kennedy too. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, because what's going to happen, right? And I'm like, no. And she's like, they're trying to silence me. I'm like, why are they trying to silence you? So I knew something was not right with her.
Yeah.
And after 30 minutes of like trying to convince her that everything's going to be okay.
Damn, you talked to this woman for 30 minutes?
Trying to convince her that everything was going to be fine. And I didn't know what to tell her, because I'm like, okay, I remember from my psychology classes certain things, but I mean, not enough to deal with this particular situation. So then somebody, a teller, was signaling to me, like, telling me to hurry up. So I said, okay. And I said, we're closing. We really have to go. It's not safe to be here because you said the Kennedys are after you and they're trying to assassinate you. And she's like, oh, yes, it's scary. And I'm like, I think I saw somebody out there. Oh, that's Robert.
No.
And she said, oh my God, I need to get my stuff. And I'm like, you'll be safe. I'm gonna distract them, and then you run out the door, and you'll be safe. He'll be paying attention to what I'm doing, and that'll give you an opportunity to make a run for it. She's like, okay. And she grabs her stuff, and we lock it immediately. So, that's my crazy story out of many, but.
Damn, I wasn't expecting that. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome.
No, one of the reasons I asked was that, I find that when you've worked in customer services, it kind of teaches you a lot about just what people are like. And as you said, like, if you study things like psychology and stuff, that helps too. But I find that, as you said, like, if you're managing something that's very personal to them, like with me, I worked in, hospitality and supermarkets. So it was always dealing with things that, I suppose are essential, food and all of these things. But like, people just lose themselves. They just seem to kind of, I don't know, like, I think in my very first year of like working in a supermarket, I was pretty stunned. I was just like this 18-year-old kid, and I'm hearing all these like abusive words and crazy situations.
Oh yes.
And then after a while, like, I just kind of went with the flow. It's like, this is just customer services, is what it's like. And then there's a break, go into university and start taking these hospitality jobs on the side, right? And then when I got into those jobs, I then looked back at my time in, supermarkets and was like, wow, I had it easy then. Like now it's like really shit has hit the fan. Like people, the way
Yeah.
people talk to you. I mean, wow.
Yes.
Like just, have you ever had like a situation like that? Like before we move on, I just want to like just ask you that real quick. Was there any time like what's the rudest customer or like
Ooh.
situation you've ever had?
Oh, wow. Yes. I had a part-time job working for a cellular phone company. And this one businesswoman who I found out later was a life coach, and she was some type of minister, I don't know, motivational person. I was new. I was fresh out of training, and I was trying to um, get everyone's cell phones to work properly, and barely learned everything. And most of the staff that was like under 21, I think the night before they all went out drinking. So for them, that was considered a sickness that they couldn't show up to work. But I digress. And
Yeah.
so she walks in, and I'm trying to help her. She's in a hurry, and she's getting frustrated because I'm taking too long. And I was having technical issues with setting up her phone. And yeah, she started being very verbally abusive. And I think there's a certain stereotype of people. If they're dressed a certain way, or if they're a certain gender, maybe they're like, oh, they're harmless. It's like, I think any living, breathing human being that can move can be harmful and dangerous. I don't believe in a label or a stereotype. But yeah, she was very verbally abusive, even used a racial slur
Oh wow.
toward
Okay.
me. Yeah, to my face. And it just baffles me that this was an individual that calls himself a life coach and a minister. So that's why I'm a firm believer. I don't believe in labels, because I think somebody could be wearing a garbage bag and be the kindest person in the world.
Hmm.
And somebody with a business suit can be the most rotten human being, So, yeah. And I think as an actor, that really taught me a lot about the human condition. Just, you just need to get to know the essence of the person, and not so much what you see with your eyes.
Kind of perplexes me as well that this person chose to be racist towards you when they're trying to get
Yeah.
something from, do you know what I mean? It's like in
Right.
basic logic, if you're trying to get something from the other person, maybe don't insult them. Like
Right.
just an idea, just a thought. I don't know.
Yeah, I think what that taught me too is it taught me to be a much better customer. Not that I was that way with anyone, but I think I'm even more empathetic now
Mm.
with servers, especially. They ask me how I'm doing, and I'm like, oh, I'm good. But more importantly, how are you doing? And they're like shocked, like nobody ever asked me that. I'm like, I know, I know, and the reason why I know that is because I've worked with the public for so long, and
Yeah.
I feel your pain. So I told them I'm very patient. So if you mess up, it's not such a big deal.
I always follow up as well with like, I've been there, man. I've been there.
Yeah.
And I just sort of look down
Yeah,
to the
we've all
floor and
been there.
it's
Right.
like, oh, you felt the pain too, huh? Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Anyway, let's move it
Totally.
forward. Thank you very
Hmm.
much for sharing. That's awesome, man.
Sure.
Again, according to your IMDb, everyone check it out. Roger E Palomino on IMDb. You can get everything there. I'm very impressed like, in terms of
Oh, thank you.
marketing and stuff like that. Just top notch.
Thank
uh,
you. Thank you.
yeah, like I said in the preamble, you're a TV host, a writer, co-producer, actor. How do you find the time to kind of juggle all of these things? And which positions do you like the most out of all of those? Like, you're doing a lot of different things, and even with me, I do a lot of different things, but I have my favorites, I guess, things that I gravitate more towards. Like, what are your favorites from them? And yeah, how do you manage them all?
That's a good question. I try not to bite off more than I can chew. So whenever I have a specific project in mind, I try to prepare for it ahead of time. But I would say my most favorite, that one's a tough one. I think most recently, because I've tackled the duties of a producer for a short film. I think I enjoyed that, because I think that taught me things that I really didn't know about myself, about delegating a project, seeing it through And I believe because I'm a very analytical person, I think way ahead. And so I'm always paying attention to the scene, like different things that could be involved in a scene, like, you know, the background, the objects that the character would have, the little nuances that they do, just every little minute detail. If their hair grew maybe like half an inch on the side, that's something I pay attention to. And I think that sounds very OCD, but I think it helps to be that way if you're in something like film production or TV production, because I think the people that you work with will appreciate you more, I would say, if you pay attention to the fine details.
I couldn't agree more. Like, I remember I was doing a short film back in Estonia, and
Oh, wow.
because of like we've basically filmed, let's say 90% of it in like one particular week, and I obviously started the project with a bit of a beard, right? So for continuity purposes, keep growing the beard, and it was
Right.
fine that we would sort of growing it, or I was growing it, right? But my beard sometimes can grow very quickly, right? So when we got to the final scene, this was a scene that was supposed to precede everything we'd already done. So I was like,
Oh, yeah.
oh, this is a bit tricky. And in the end, it didn't really matter. You couldn't really tell, but it bugged me. And like, I feel that when you say that, like the OCD part of it, I'm like, oh no, I don't want it to, because the thing is, those fine details can pull you out. You know, it's like when, for instance, when Game of Thrones was in its last season, and you know there was that famous scene where there was like a coffee cup on the
Oh,
table, a
yes.
Starbucks coffee cup or
Yes.
something, and it was like, oh no, like no.
Yeah, I would be the one halting production saying, "Wait a minute, we need to get that out of the shot." And
Yeah,
if the director says, "Oh, but the time," I'm like, "Great, I know we're limited on time, but we need to get that out of the shot."
it just blows my mind because obviously it's filmed like, you know, what, a year in advance, probably longer, and it's obviously they had to CGI it out later, but come on,
Luckily,
man,
there's
how can you not notice that? Like, it's
yeah, and sometimes even accidents happen on a set. Like we had on our short called Ausencia, which is translated to the absence of. There was a scene where there was a picture on the wall that was very pivotal to the plot, and the character I played is looking at it, but there's a glare from the sun. So you were mentioning CGI, so I did bring somebody on board. His name is Jason Bolds, a very talented special effects guy that works with us. He's the one that corrected that, because had it not been for him correcting that, you wouldn't have been able to see the picture, which was very important for the scene. And so, yeah, I'm grateful too that software like that exists even today, because that'll save a project big time.
yeah, it's that old expression of fix it in post, I guess, is where that
Right.
comes from. But like, it's,
Exactly.
I do think that like a lot of the time it's very important to kind of get it right. You know what I mean? Like when you're
The
there, kind of
first
thing.
time.
Yeah, because some things are really difficult, and you simply can't change. You know, what I mean? Like, when I think of like music, for example, it's definitely like that. Like if something just isn't sung good enough, it's not sung good enough. You know what I mean? And no
Right.
amount of like editing is going to change that. And with acting,
Exactly.
I think it's the same thing. It's like sometimes you just need to nail it as much as you can, you know, when you do it. So that raw footage is then, you know, you're able to do something with it if you do need to like tweak it here and there.
Exactly.
But yeah, thanks for sharing, man. Sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Actually, before we move on, like, what were your favorite parts about doing that particular like role? Like, what would you say you enjoyed the most about that?
I think what I enjoyed the most is having the opportunity to play a character so three-dimensional, a character that was dealing with so much at one time, and touching on issues of non-binary, because here in
Oh,
the
okay.
USA we finally have terminology and things to really explain everything that's happening with people.
Mm.
But in other parts of the world, especially in Latin America, that's something that's still relatively new. And that's the thing about Latin American culture, that because I guess maybe traditionally it's so traditional that it's really hard to talk about certain topics out loud. So maybe that's why there aren't specific terms tied to a specific individual yet, but the conversations are starting, and that's something that I found that was very important for this project. not just touching on LGBTQ issues, but touching on so many other things around that. And I think this character was so important for me at a time in which I was learning quite a bit about what it's like to be in this specific individual's shoes. So, and I'm grateful that it's touched so many people as well.
You know, I remember like, also because I've been a supporter of like LGBTQ like for just since ever, you know,
Yeah.
and but when this stuff started coming up about, you know, gender, I guess what would we call it? Just the gender debate or something, right?
Oh yeah, there's
Yeah,
gender
like
identity and
gender
expression.
identity, right.
Yeah.
I remember kind of initially kind of thinking it was all ridiculous, and like in fairness, I didn't really know much about it. I would just see like, you know, those classic memes and like the crazy stuff you sometimes see in America and stuff, and so I didn't take
Right.
it very seriously. And then I started seeing like little things like, you know, obviously what happened in Canada with the law change and, you know, it becoming like a legal requirement and stuff. But I remember then it went from me like not taking it seriously and kind of seeing it as a bit of a joke to then me kind of taking it seriously, but kind of poking holes in it and kind of thinking, well, okay, if this is something to be taken seriously, like you then have to kind of change society, right? You then have to think,
Right.
okay, we've always been like male, female, right? So now we've got
Right.
like change everything, and that takes time. And that was why I had that concern, because, you know, obviously with Canada going ahead and changing it, it was like, okay, you've done that and we know why you've done that, and I don't personally have an issue with that, but what you're asking people to do is to change something that they're kind of not familiar with, you know, they don't fully understand. And that was my argument as well, is like, if everything's laid out and it's very clear and it's like, this is the way it is, and you can be like, okay, and then so then you would look at yourself and be like, because I do this a lot with things, anything in life, you know, I'm a very open-minded person. So when I look at something, particularly something that I don't like or I have an issue with, I look at it and I'm like, well, why do I have an issue with that thing? Like what is it about that I don't like? And I couldn't
Right.
find anything that I disliked about it other than, you know, the fact that it just wasn't ironed out exactly. And I thought that could be damaging potentially if there's like a misunderstanding there. Like I thought that people would exploit it, and there has been examples of people doing that here and there. But I
Right.
think, as you said, the more information that you have, the more you know, it is kind of easier to understand. Like when I boiled it down to its simplest part, right, it was like, okay, so people that are like in this third category, which is probably the easiest way to put it, like male, female, third, like that's kind of the most understandable way for me. I know there's like many variations and stuff, I get that, but like
Right.
when you just try and make it simplistic, it's like, okay, I get it. What's the key thing that someone wants? They want you to accept them as they are, and they want you
Hmm.
to refer to them with like specific terms, right? So if let's go with the easiest one. If it's like third, then it's like they them or something like that, right? And I was like, can I do that? Yes, I can. So what's the issue? No issue. And I was like, okay, well, we're good. You know,
Yeah.
but like, I think the problem, as you said, like in certain parts of the world, is there is not enough information. There's not enough debates. I can tell you in the UK, you know, while it is debated and stuff, it's not quite at the level where it's like changed and everyone understands. Because I feel that like with everything else, like with, you know, homosexuality, for example, or bisexuality
Hmm.
or whatever, like it's very clear and it's like, oh yeah, that's straightforward. Like, why would you have an issue? It's so simple and straightforward. But crucially, there's information, lots and lots of information. Whereas I
Right.
feel with
Yeah.
this, there isn't as much. So it's good that we have projects like the one that you were in, where it's kind of highlighting, you know, well, it's giving information, and it's also, you know, depicting this as well. You know, I mean, it's not completely new. I do know that obviously in Star Trek, you know, classically there were characters that were, you know, non-binary and or transgender or whatever you want to call it. Like I won't go into too much detail. I'm a big Star Trek fan, but like I remember
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
thing many years ago. Like it's not like a completely new idea, but it's probably in the 2010s is where it started getting its rooting and its footing and stuff. And you know, I think it's good that, you know, artists like yourself are bringing that to the forefront and kind of giving information. I think that's important because we don't have enough information.
Yeah, and I think that's why, like, early on too, like, one of my favorite artists, I would say, that can represent the non-binary spectrum a lot is David Bowie, and that's why so many people
Yeah.
here love him so much because of that. And so, you know, I drew my inspiration from many people for the role, but yeah, I paid attention to David Bowie too.
Nice. I'm a big Bowie fan, man. How can you not be?
Yeah. How can
Sorry.
right? How can anybody in the world not be?
Yeah.
Even in the most remote place that has maybe no access to electricity, they know who David Bowie is.
I'll be honest. It's one of those. He's one of those people. I've never met someone that didn't like Bowie.
Right, me either.
Awesome.
Me either,
Anyway,
honestly. Or has never heard of him. I mean, everybody has heard of him, even if you can barely communicate in the same language. So,
let's bring it back to you, man. What do you
sure.
like most about acting?
Oh, what I love about acting is continuously learning about the human condition. For me, I consider myself a little bit more method. I draw from a lot of my experiences, but if I don't have those emotional experiences for the specific role, I'll at least know somebody or at least try to talk to somebody a lot about that specific maybe situation or emotion. But I think that's what I enjoy the most. And for me, it's almost like a very therapeutic experience. Like, wow, I walked 1,000 miles in this individual's shoes. Now I have a different perspective or maybe a bigger appreciation. And I also love that you're able to reach people in a way that to me, it seems like you can't in a different profession. Like if you want to get your point across, instead of maybe having like a roundtable discussion, almost like a political debate, you could just show that in the form of something like film.
Yeah, couldn't agree more with that. I mean, it's kind of like what we were saying before. It's like getting across certain messages or information that isn't otherwise necessarily readily available. You know, it's a great medium. You know, everyone
Yeah,
pays attention to movies
everyone.
and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
this is something that I'm getting happier about as well, because I feel that big movies at the moment are kind of doing a half job with representation. It's like certain movies and TV shows, they're getting it right. I'll give you a real quick example, right? I've said this before on the
Sure.
podcast, but since we're talking about it, I remember in Star Trek, in the Picard series, they portrayed a lesbian relationship, right? But
Right.
the way they did it was really clever, because like the two characters, it's never said, but it's kind of it's like implied, I guess, through their character. Like when you see them together, it's like at the end of an episode, and it's not like focused on like massively. It's kind of like panned around, and it's like, okay, so this is happening now.
Right.
But it makes sense. It's logical. It works for the characters. Great, we like this. This is good, right? But then you
Yeah.
see it in like other movies or shows. Like I remember seeing it in possibly the final Star Wars movie. There was just a random lesbian kiss, right? And I was
Right.
like, right, but where's the context? Where's the story? Like, where's, you know, like this was just random, and you just know that it was thrown in a, I thought, because this was like a celebratory sequence, right? It's like, we've won, we've beat the bad guys, yeah, like celebrate, party, great, right? Like feel good moment. And they just threw it in there, and I was like, ugh. I mean, I know what you're doing, and that's why I don't like it. It's not that I don't like this. This is great, but I just don't like why you're doing it. The movie makers, they're trying to be like, we're woke, we know what we're doing, we're trying to be involved. And it's like, I think there's ways to do this, and I would like to see more of like the first example, you know what I mean? Where it's like just kind of portrayed as like, this is life, rather than like, this is our quick 15-second throw it in so we're covering all bases kind of approach. You know?
Right. Yeah. It kind of makes you question, what are their motives? Like maybe they're
Yeah.
doing it because they realize like, oh, there's a big viewing base that is LGBTQ. Let's just throw this in there, even though there's no specific plot or, you know, three-dimensional character that we can develop. Let's just throw it in there just for the sake of throwing it in there. But I think that's why I love independent film from not just the USA, but all over the world, because we could tell better stories and stories that are real.
Yeah, I agree, man. And like, it's funny, like it's only more in recent years that I've been doing things like YouTube and a podcast, and obviously looking at things developing as they are, things like BLM as an example, that I've started to
Right.
realize like how kind of weird it is that there's like so many decades of film and media that is literally just white men and women acting, and that's it, and very little, kind of people from other countries.
Whitewashing.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's like I'm not trying to get on a tirade or anything. It's just like
Oh
how
yeah.
society has changed over the years. But when I think back, it's just pretty weird when you think about it. It's like, well, this isn't really like a representation of like society, is it? This is just like,
No.
you know what I mean? Like sometimes you find great movies, like, it's not like a reason for them to be necessarily like disregarded. It's just that they just happen to have, like, for instance, no black people in, and it's like, that is weird. It's like,
It is. It is. And you're right, because I feel like unless, like, especially with casting, I feel like everybody has an opportunity to contribute to a project, unless you're doing a documentary about Finland in the 1500s. I mean, does it really matter what somebody looks like on the outside necessarily? I mean, and you're right. I've thought about that myself too, through my experiences when I audition and they're saying, oh, you're not right for the role. And I'm like, am I not right because of the way I sound, or is it the way I look? It's like, those are the things that you kind of ask yourself. And so when I eventually get involved in casting, I'm going to have a completely different mindset. I'm going for, like, for example, you project a lot. I'd say if I were to cast you in something immediately, I would cast you as the doctor that's going to deliver the bad news to the patient. Why? Because I don't know, you convey this certain energy. Like, if you're going to give somebody bad news, they won't necessarily freak out as much. And if they do, they'll feel more comfortable doing it with you. You have like I don't know, you have like this trusting energy that you convey. Oh, whether you believe it yourself or not, but it's something that an audience member, and those that watch this podcast can probably, argue or agree with me, but I would say that's the energy you convey. So if I were to cast you immediately in something, I'd say as a doctor delivering bad news.
It's funny. I knew you were giving a serious answer, so I didn't want to like interrupt.
Yeah.
But the whole
Remember,
time I'm
like,
like, just like, I can ruin it by saying this or this, because I like to have a laugh and stuff. And it's just funny because a lot of the time, like, I really like to play villains, because I'm not like I feel weird saying this, but like, I consider myself as a good person, and I've been told.
Yeah, that's the energy you convey.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But conversely, I just love to play complete asshole. I just love that. Like, it's
Yeah.
like, well, I'm not going to ever be like this in real life, so why not be like super horrible and also like show a range? Because I feel like as an actor, it's very easy to get like pigeonholed or cornered, and like, this is all you can do. This is you and nothing else. And I love that when an actor breaks out and they play like a despicable character, and you hate them for it, and it's great. That's what acting should be. And I often think about that, like, with sort of like aspiring to become a professional actor, I think about like, well, what are the different things I could do? What do I want to do? What do I want to try? And, I suppose it's not easy. I don't think, obviously, but it's not something that like necessarily comes to everyone. I think everyone's range is different, and it's not necessarily a bad thing if you don't have like a big range. I mean, maybe you're just really, really good in one particular area, but
Right.
I feel like you're going to get more, roles and probably have a longer, more successful career if you have a bigger range, maybe.
Yeah, and not every actor, for example, and it's not a bad thing, not every actor has a very commercial look. Maybe they have
Yeah.
looks specifically for, like, you're going to be the character actor, or you're going to be the face that represents this organization, because you have this appeal visually that everybody, men and women, love. So yeah, I mean, if you have a specific set of skills, and maybe you convey a certain energy, then yeah, I think the right casting person should be honest and say, you're more for, like, in your case, other than the doctor, I would cast you like in a period piece. Like, if I were to do something about like America in the early 20th century, if you shave and put you in one of those suits, like the Great Gatsby, it's believable. could visualize you in that.
I would
because
adore it. I would adore being in
yeah,
a
so would I.
film.
And I always reference those because I love, the golden era of Hollywood from that time. Just everything about it. I love period pieces.
I always wish people dress like that. Like, my ideal style is basically like that, or like, Matt Smith as Doctor Who, that kind of like classic, blazers, tweed, bow ties, all that stuff. It's great. Like, why do
That's
more people
why
dress like that?
and yeah, and that's why I wore this shirt, because I actually got it from the UK. This is like
Oh,
a
really?
throwback to like the Mod Squad from the late 60s, but
Yeah,
yeah, this is
yeah,
actually
yeah,
from
yeah.
the UK. So
Cool. Awesome.
yeah,
Awesome. Well, thank you. I'm having so much fun just chatting to you here, but
me
I want to
too.
try and kind of like bring this back to you.
Sure.
What are your main goals and aspirations with acting?
My main goals are to eventually form my own production company. And I still love what I do in my current role as the outreach director where I'm at
Right.
with a public access station. But yeah, I eventually want to have my own production company. And I think because of a lot of what you mentioned, I want to develop projects and films that all actors can be proud of. And I'm sure you're familiar with Ryan Murphy's work.
No, I don't know necessarily.
He's done like American Horror Story, Glee,
Ah, okay. Yeah.
Ratchet, American Crime Story, but yeah, I
That's
want to follow.
such a range as well, because it's like I love American Horror Story, but I hate Glee. Like, wow.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like, fair play.
Right. And I say I want to follow his suit because what he bases his projects on is the same thing. What the actor can portray and convey to an audience. It doesn't matter their age or what they look like, because as you know, Hollywood still to this day, especially if you're a woman, if you're in your 30s, they're like, sorry, we don't have anything for you. And it's like, well, I could still play 30. It's like, yeah, but you don't look right. Even though you are 30, it's like, well, wait a minute. So it's very
Yeah, that
insulting
doesn't.
because there's
The
a lot of
hell.
talented actors. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. But Ryan Murphy, I think his mindset is you could be 105, male or
Mm.
female. If you still have the energy to act and you can convince an audience of something, then he's going to hire you. And I want to have that same mindset too. I don't want to just limit it to, a certain type, a certain look, a certain age. I think that, and who knows, maybe I'm developing more of a European mindset as far as like actors, because I see a lot of brilliant actors in Europe that
Mm.
are in their retirement years and they're brilliant. And, that's the type of environment I want to have in a project.
I remember, like, even when I was in Estonia, like there were certain actors there, top of their game for Estonia, and I was like, they could easily be in a major picture. Like, I'll never
Yeah.
forget. There's this one guy. His name is Mike Melmstein, right? And he's principally just like top of his game in Estonia, right? And I saw him a couple of times in Estonia, but one time I saw him in the UK. He'd actually come over specially, and at the time I was dating an Estonian woman, so we went to this Estonian house. It was funny because it like looked out of place in the rest of the street. It was nice, and we went and we saw, and he basically did this kind of like one-man show entirely in Estonian, had subtitles and stuff. But he just did it himself, and I knew this guy was a good actor. But then when I saw him do that and basically talk at length for like, I don't know, like an hour or something, and like paint this story, I was just transfixed. I was just like, wow, that's talent right there. When you can do something like that and with very little as well. I feel like, it's very easy to do convincing acting when all the tools are given to you and stuff. But sometimes it's better when it's like taken away from you and it's made harder. And you know what I mean? Like I feel like it's kind of an obvious point to make, but to me, a good actor is someone who's versatile and can kind of work with any situation and just make that work, whatever.
Right.
But yeah, I couldn't agree more with you on that. I think there's a lot of good talent out there, and it's untapped, let's say.
Yeah, untapped. Yeah, and like you said, having an appreciation for like a certain time in history, if you can find ways to save money and create that and recreate it, even better. And that's also one of my goals too, is eventually recreate a lot of things that you would probably see in the 40s or 30s, and but modernize it a bit.
Absolutely. I'm going to take you a little bit down a serious route now, just while I have a bit of time left with you.
Sure.
So obviously, growing up as in the USA as a man from South America, this is a twofold question. So I hope you don't mind me asking this, but I think
No,
it's,
not at
it's
all.
important.
Shoot.
So basically, you're from South America. You're also, a proud gay man as well.
Yes.
I wanted to kind of find out what the biggest challenges you faced during this time in terms of discrimination have been, because we know that America is very varied, and you know
Yeah.
I find this too, that like there's a big difference between like the reality of racism and homophobia in terms of like what people talk about, and then there's like
Right.
the everyday reality that people lead. And obviously depends where you're living, depends on your community, depends on a lot of things, but a lot
Hmm.
of the time everyone has a couple of stories, and stuff like that. And I kind of wanted to kind of gauge an idea of the sort of biggest challenges you face, because obviously you're going into this industry, the entertainment industry, and as you kind of outlined before throughout the course of this conversation, sometimes certain things put you at a disadvantage in the eyes of like a casting director or something, and it shouldn't. It's ridiculous, but
Right.
that's the mentality of certain companies or certain directors or whatever. And I always kind of attribute this to that kind of institutional perspective, institutional racism or like
Right.
whatever, it's always kind of like this, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like specifically a company or something, but it's like that mentality of like, this is how it is, we're not budging outside of this, that's how it is, kind of thing. And obviously that restricts people from different groups, as you said, like there's still sexism in Hollywood where there shouldn't be, and
Right.
it's ridiculous. So bringing it back, I just wanted to know, like, what are the biggest challenges that you face?
Um, in the industry, right?
Um, in your personal life as well, because I think that's is interesting and worthwhile too.
Yeah. I'd say in this city, that's the thing about Houston, Texas. We're quickly becoming the third largest city in the USA. We're very international.
Right.
But even though that's the case, I still feel like not everyone, but maybe just a few, maybe handfuls of people still might view you as like, you could look a certain way on the outside and it doesn't matter how you conduct yourself or how you dress. They still have this preconceived notion, like if you are a foreigner and you happen to be from Latin America, that you're automatically either A, running away from something, or B, trying to take somebody's job. And I'm like, I remember somebody told me something once that made a lot of sense. They're like, you can't take something away from someone that they didn't already have or didn't work for. And I'm like, yeah, that's true, because everything I've had in life, I've had to really work hard for. And like you said, it's many times when you're the minority in a specific situation, you have to constantly prove yourself. And not just as a Latin American, but as a gay man too,
Mm.
because, people still have stereotypes about, attributing being gay, whether you're male or female, to like male and female gender roles, and they're completely separate. And so I would say that my biggest challenge would be just that the no matter what I do or say or act, people still are going to have a preconceived notion of me, no matter what. But despite that, those challenges, I just follow what a lot of successful, strong women have done. Despite all of the obstacles, they just continue and move forward. They're like, yeah, the best way to reach someone is just by being successful, and you're successful when you try to reach your goals regardless of all the challenges that you have, because no matter what, we're all as humanity, we're always going to be challenged in life. And it's not what makes someone successful, the number of challenges, but how you overcome them or try to overcome them.
And would you say that your experience or your overall experience now is like better or worse compared to say like 10 years ago, 15 years ago? Like, has it gotten better?
It's gotten better. I think because I always try to do what has been given to me as advice is surround yourself by people that you want to learn from
Mm,
or that give you a lot as far as like a support system. And I'm grateful that I at least have family and close friends and coworkers too, that I consider like a family and friends that have always constantly supported me. They know that I'm out and gay, and so they're very supportive of that. And I think because maybe they're all artists, and that
mm.
might have something to do with it. But I would say I'm lucky that life has taken me down this path, and so I try to utilize every opportunity to the best of my abilities.
But like in terms of like, you know, where you live in the places that you tend to go and stuff, like, would you say the overall kind of people walking down the street, do you know what I mean? Like, are people maybe more normal, more accepting? I don't know how to phrase it correct. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of,
Yeah.
because I feel that like I've been very lucky in the UK growing up here, that I feel that like I've seen racism, I've seen homophobia, I've seen all of these different things, but I'd say like the average person in the UK is very, you know, not racist, not sexist, not homophobic. We're just a very accepting nation, I think, in general, and particularly in
Right.
places like London, where it's like so highly multicultural, and like the city is so built on that. You know what I mean? It's like you said, it's
Right.
like when you have a highly international place, it's built on that premise. So being racist or something like that would just be illogical. But
Yeah.
I do kind of, because I asked another guest about this as well, and I feel that like it's an important question to ask to kind of gauge where we're headed. Do you know what I mean? Because there's a very big difference between what you think, what you see online, and then kind of like what people's experiences are. So like, would you say that it's gotten better? Like maybe you get less discrimination than you experienced growing up or something like that? Like,
I would say so. I mean, we're very lucky as a world that there's more people on TV that look like us, sound like us, have our life experiences, and I'm grateful that those people are honest and say, this is who I am, take it or leave it. And I think because of that, I would say when I walk down the street now, I'd say people are I wouldn't say more accepting, but they just accept what they see and what they experience. So I'm grateful for that, and I'm grateful that I live in a city like this because, like I said, it's a very international city, very young, and so this city is very tied to the arts as well, and I'm grateful for that. So I would say it's gotten better.
cool, that's good to hear, man. As long as we're headed in the right direction, do you know what I mean? Like,
Right?
that's what I'm
Yeah,
hoping
yeah,
for.
that's
Right.
true.
So you're also a singer. When did you start singing?
Oh,
And do you have any like major aspirations there, or like what's the deal there?
yeah, actually, that was an interesting story because, growing up in Latin America, I would always hear something on the radio or a record and I
Right.
would try
Yeah.
to emulate the singer. So then when we moved to the USA, when I was about maybe 10 years old, 11 years old, my dad put me in singing lessons and nothing
Oh,
came
cool.
of that because I think a few months after that, he got laid off. And so I stopped going to these singing lessons. But I think one thing that stayed with me was just using the right breathing.
Mm.
And as a singer, you kind of know the importance of breathing. So that was something that was very much untapped, and I didn't tap back into it until I did my first musical on stage. It was an original play called The Last Chance in Calamity Gulch that takes place in the late 19th century in America. And so I got to sing on stage. And from that point on, I started doing little things here and there. There's an app that I use where I, sing and they have the background music. And so I'm able to like extract that and put that out there. But I wouldn't say I'm anywhere close to being like a professional singer,
Mm.
but I at least know that I can hit the right notes if I have to for a project. But I was gonna say your voice is amazing, so I really enjoyed listening to your that. I mean, really good. And my goal now is to learn how to play an instrument. I want to learn piano because I know you play
Oh
guitar,
yeah,
but I want to
man.
learn piano.
I want to learn piano, man. That's the
Yeah,
next one. It looks so gorgeous, and there's so
it
many
does.
good musicians out there. Like I'd love to learn how to play like Chopin or something like that. Just to,
Oh, yes.
oh, yeah. Sorry. Thanks for sharing that,
Yeah.
man. That's fun.
Yeah, you
Um,
bet.
Yeah, you know, we were mentioned in the preamble, you know, you're a trained tap dancer as well. I thought that was kind of quirky. You know, you don't come across that every day. How long did it take you to learn how to tap dance? And yeah, like just tell us about tap dancing.
Okay, I'm glad you asked that because that was an interesting story. The end of 2016, my goal for the new year, 2017, was to learn tap, and the reason
Oh,
why is we were going to celebrate our 30-year anniversary of being on TV in Houston at my work, and that
cool.
was going to be celebrated in August of that year. So I started from January up until like August taking tap, and the instructor was like, "You've never taken tap before?" And I'm like, "No," but she was like, "Okay, because you seem to have most of the movements and rhythms down." I'm
Oh,
like, "Okay, I guess that's a good thing." And but I told her I grew up watching tap dancers like Sammy Davis Jr., the Nicholas brothers. I mean, just amazing tappers here in America. So I said, yeah, you know, that inspired me to like say, you know what, I'm at this point in my life, I want to learn it. And so I did. So I learned it at least well enough to perform it on stage. And what made that moment so memorable is I got to perform it in front of our mayor of our city,
oh,
which I
cool.
now I'm part of the Mayor Turner's LGBTQ advisory board now. But yeah, I wanted to perform because I knew it was going to be there, and I wanted to make an impression, and I did because then backstage I heard a voice saying "Roger, Roger," and I looked, and it was the mayor, and he was like, "I loved your performance," and
Oh,
so that was
nice.
something I'm never going to forget. I think that was I was very happy.
Awesome, man. Thanks for sharing. That's a great
Yeah.
story. Um, yeah, just kind of like bringing it all to a close. Do you have any kind of like upcoming projects that you'd like to tell us about, or anything we should look out for, or maybe just some final thoughts that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, actually, I'm currently going to be working on a project this weekend that I can't really talk too much about it, but all I can say is that it is going to deal with very important issues that are happening in our society. And so, when I was presented that opportunity, I said yes. You know, I wanted to expand as an actor in a role I've never done before. So most definitely. And I'm also working on a couple of scripts, and I'm working on these scripts based on our current situation with a global pandemic, things that could be done and still following protocol, still with like a very limited cast and crew. So those projects actually I don't have a title for yet, but I'm just barely starting them now. So
Well, listen, I wish you the best of luck with them. You
thank
know,
you.
I think you're a very, very talented person, and I really look forward to seeing where you end up. But particularly with these projects that I think that you're directing and everything like that, like you seem to be very passionate, and you know, it's really encouraging to hear that you're, you know, pursuing this, and that it's like something like that maybe can become more prevalent in society, especially in the entertainment industry, with things like representation and just, yeah, just putting like real issues there, because it's great to watch, you know, a Hollywood flick every now and again, but like it's even better to watch it when it's actually relatable and, you know, like life.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
You hit the nail on the head. I think that's key to any project is relatability. I try to keep that in mind. Relatability and what is so international that everyone's going to understand, regardless of what language you perform it in.
yeah, yeah, and then that it's just funny you say that as well. Obviously, with your main kind of inspirations being, you know, dating all the way back to like Chaplin and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, a more recent example I think in the UK is obviously Mr. Bean. And I remember growing
Oh
up,
yeah.
I always used to think, oh, this is funny, this is silly. But now I look at it, and Rowan Atkinson, the man that portrays him, is obviously a very, very intelligent man, and he's done other things like Blackadder and all these other different TV shows, right? So he's clearly a very intelligent
Yes.
man, but Mr. Bean was him playing like a fool, I guess, or a simple man, and yet it was his most successful thing that he's ever done, and it had the biggest reach, and it's made him like famous everywhere on the planet. And it's because of that
Yeah.
exact thing that you said, that kind of universal relatability, something that, you know, anyone can understand, relate to, enjoy. And creating stuff like that is probably like the ultimate dream for anyone in the entertainment industry, isn't it? To have that kind of
Yeah.
reach.
Yeah, and if I've been anywhere half successful now in acting, it's because I've been paying attention to a lot of the European school of thought when it comes to acting, and that is just try to diversify everything as much as possible. As a performer and actor, try to learn as much as possible. If you're not a singer, at least take some introductory courses. Maybe you don't want to be a singer, but you can at least hit a note or two, or that way, if you're in a musical, you're able to at least, do one or two songs. But I always say the more you learn in life, the better you are.
And on that note, I'd like to sort of end it there and say thank you so much for
Yeah.
agreeing to be on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've learned a lot,
Yes.
and I'm sure all of our listeners will be very happy. We're currently like approaching 40 episodes. We're like 35, 36, something like that. So it's getting pretty crazy, but I like this. We're getting all different types of guests on here, and we're growing and moving forward and stuff. And it's a real pleasure to have had you on the show, and I wish you all the best in the future.
Thank you.
And to everyone listening to the Christian Reeve podcast, I hope you're enjoying it. As I always say, let me know if there's anyone in particular you'd like on the show, or if you'd like a particular topic covered or whatever. I'm always open to these things. We recently set up a Discord server for the podcast for this express reason. I'm trying to cater for you as much as I can. Okay, guys. so be vocal. Let me know what you want to see, what you want to hear. But thank you to everyone listening. And until next time, peace out. See you in the next one.